Okay, so we're holding an Ayin Daled and an Aleph at the Mishnah.
How far down?
The Mishnah is about a third of the way down, about 12 lines, something like that.
A third of the way down.
Mishnah, Ayin Daled and an Aleph. See it? Maybe it's a quarter of the way down from the top.
Near the top, not far from the top.
Oh, near the top. I'm looking the wrong page. That's why. Thought I had it here.
Ayin Daled.
Yeah, yeah.
Right down
here? Yeah.
Ayin Daled, Ad v'Ad b'chlal.
Ah. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
How's the Gitech?
$9?
Yeah, Ayin Daled.
It's Ayin Hey. Ayin Daled, you're
Okay.
right. So here, Mishnah, right?
Oh, here, Mishnah. Yeah, I see. I raised that. Yeah.
So the Mishnah talks about three cases, two which are kind of similar in the same type. I'd say two variants of the same type of gerushin, and then the third one is kind of a different inyan. It's you have to work on trying to figure out what exactly is the flow between the first two cases and the third case. So the Mishnah says, the man gives the get, and he says, this is a get, almanas, that you give me, Masayim zuz, 200 zuz. So it's a binding tonight, and therefore, if she gives the Masayim zuz, it's a good gerushin, and if she doesn't, then it's not a good gerushin. The discussion, the Gemara is going to be, at what point is the gerushin chal? Do we say that once she gives the 200 zuz, it's chal from the time that he handed her the get? So in other words, let's say today he hands her the get, and he says, and it takes her 200 zuz. It's a lot of money. It's about a year's salary. So she's got to get through, I don't know, like $50,000, let's say. I don't know what exactly the equivalent nowadays, but it's a sizable sum. Let's say $10,000. So she's got to get it together. So it's going to take her, I don't know, 3 months, let's say, to get the sum of $10,000 together. So at the end of 3 months, then she goes in and says, okay, here's $10,000. So is the gerushin chal from when she gives the $10,000? Or do we say that now you'll fulfill the tanai, so the gerushin was chal when I handed you the get? When was the moment of the gerushin? In other words, to qualify for the gerushin, she needs to give the 200 zuz.
Or a symbolic portion of it, possibly.
No, you can't give a down payment. You have to be mekayim the tanai. When it comes to kiddushin, you have such a thing, that the money of the kiddushin can create a kiddushin, and the rest of the money can be like a chayiv. Over here, the idea is, this gerushin will only be a gerushin if you give him Masayim zuz. If you don't give him Masayim zuz, it's not a good gerushin. So if she gives 150, she never makes the Masayim zuz, it was never a good gerushin. He's got to give the money back, but the point is it's not a good gerushin. So the tanai is a binding tanai. The question is, once she's mekayim the tanai, is it only a gerushin from the moment that she was mekayim the tanai, or is it lemafreya going to be a gerushin from the moment he gave it? That's going to be a discussion.
When you say lemafreya, she's giving it in installments over a period of time?
No. 3 months later, she gives a lump sum, 200 zuz. Is the gerushin chal when she hands him the money, or is the gerushin chal from the time that he handed her the get 3 months ago?
Retroact.
It's when it's tonight. It's supposed to be fixed. You give me Messiah.
It's not a good gerushin without giving the 200 zuz. But the question is, when is the moment of the gerushin? In other words, you can make a tanai by saying, this is going to be yours. Like, let's say I want to give you a gift. And I say, this is your gift. I'll manas that 2 months, between now and 2 months, you give me $100. Right? Doesn't sound like a gift, but whatever. Let's say, I say, if you say hello to me every day for the next 30 days, so then this matana will be a good matana. If you don't say hello to me, if you miss 1 day, you'll miss 1 day. If you miss 1 day, then the matana is batal. It's not a good matana. So when 30 days are up, it's not, and I say, the matana is yours today. It's yours today. But only if you say hello to me for the next 30 days. If you miss a day, then it's not a good matana. But what happens after 30 days? You checked off all the boxes, right? You did the whole calendar. Every day you said hello to him. So does it become yours after 30 days or does it become yours from day one? That's the question. Okay? The Gemara will discuss it. Okay. But the point is that it's binding. If she doesn't give the 200 zuz, it's not a good gersh. Now it's interesting. The first Tanai is very open-ended. It doesn't give her a time frame. That means that he could give her the get today, and 15 years from now, she gets together the 200 zuz, and then we now have a Kiyam HaTanai. So for 15 years, she wasn't sure if she's Megreshus, she's not Megreshus. And now, 15 years later, she's Mekayim the Tanai. So in other words, this Gerushin could be a very long Gerushin.
Needs an expiration date.
So he doesn't, the expiration date is when he expires. Yeah, at that point.
Yeah,
and even that is not really true because if she's Mekayim the Tanai, it's a discussion in the Gemara. Maybe she could give the Torah Tzuz to the Yorshim and be Mekayim the Tanai L'Mafreya. Right? And then it turns out that they weren't married for the past, 50 years. Yeah? So that's the case. That's the first case. Next case. So here he gives an expiration date. He says, you got 30 days to come up with the cash. If you come up within 30 days and give it to me, then it's a good gerushin. If not, not a good gerushin. So the din is, it's binding. If she comes up with the money within 30 days and gives it to him, then she's megreshus. But if she does not come up with the money, day 31, she shows up with the 200 zuz, it's too late. Even if he says, you know what? It's okay, I'll give an extra day. You can't do that. Because the gerushin was given al tanai, that you need to give him 200 zuz within the 30 days. You weren't Makayim the Tanai, it's not a good gerushin. Now, he could take the get back and give it again, that's fine. But the original Maisa gerushin...
Tanai is made without any specification of, I give you 30 days to give you the Messiah, or 10 days, or 6 months, or so.
That's open-ended.
What?
It's infinite.
It's open-ended, so does that...
When you Maisa Mashiach, she could still be Makayim the Tanai.
But so is that get still good?
Yeah, a get's gonna be good.
That doesn't make sense. Because why give a get when it could be in 1 day or 10 days or 6 months or 10 years?
Well, he's putting the ball in her court. If she wants to have her garrison, she better come up with the money. He's putting her to test. He's putting her to the test. Yeah, can she come up with the money to be able to have the garrison bicha? Okay. All right, so those are the first two cases in the Mishnah. We understand the basic difference is, do you have a time frame or do you not have a time frame? But it's basically the same case. The point is that if she fulfills the Tanai, the gerushin is good. If she does not fulfill the Tanai, the gerushin is not good. It's very interesting because we say the gerushin is Bal Korcha. So it's kind of optional in this case. So it's a very strange type of situation that kind of she can decide if she wants a gerushin or not. She could say, you know what, I don't want to be divorced. And then she doesn't give the Tanai Tzuz. And then she's not divorced, even though he gave her a get. Or she decides, yeah, I am going to. It could be that's the Chiddush of the Mishnah. It could be the Chiddush of the... In other words, we know there's a halacha called Tanai. This Mishnah is not telling me the halacha of Tanai. I know in Kiddushin Tanai. I know in other places Tanai. So this Mishnah is not telling me there's Tanai. But the Mishnah seems to be telling me a Chiddush that there's a Tanai in Gerushin. What's the Chiddush that there's a Tanai in Gerushin? It could be this point, because Gerushin, according to the Torah, is Baal Korcha of the Isha. And the way that the Baal is setting it up, it kind of becomes optional. She decides if the gerushin is going to be chal. It seems to be contrary to the way the Torah set it up. But since you're using a vehicle of the Torah, which is called Tanai, it's a din d'oraisa. Tanai is a din d'oraisa. We learned from Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain when Moshe Rabbeinu told them, if you want to go and get your chelik in Eretz Yisrael from Ever Liardain, then you need to go. You're not pater from going to war. You got to go to war in Eretz Yisrael, and then only then, after everybody gets their nachala, then you can go back and get your chelik. So he made a big Tanai with them, and that was binding. So we learned from there the halachos of Tanai. Over here, that's what's going on. Even though gerushin itself can be done by korcha of the isha, but he can go ahead and make it dependent on her fulfilling of the Tanai, which is really up to her to decide if she's going to fulfill the Tanai or not. Yeah.
Isn't it by common sense that the act is not complete until the Tanai is fulfilled?
No, it's not common sense at all, because the Maisa Gerushin is finished when it's in her hands.
The Maisa of Gerushin is finished when?
When the get is in her hands. So he handed her the get, and he says, this is your get if you give me 200 zuz.
But
so he did the Maisa Gerushin.
gets that 200 zuz though.
It doesn't make a difference. It could be, it doesn't make a difference. It could be whenever he gets the 200 zuz, that's the moment of gerushin. In other words, that's the moment where the gerushin will be chal, or it'll be chal mafreya from the time that he gave it. We're going to see in the Gemara. Okay?
Okay, like that. No, I see the fact that she's given the get, even though the Tanai is not fulfilled in terms of the timing when she pays.
Exactly.
What the that becomes irrelevant.
Exactly. It's relevant in the sense, is the gerushin chal or not, but it's not really a gerushin process. A Tanai is not gerushin. A Tanai is it's in some ways it's kind of like if you'd have a you have these explosives that you attach to something, right? So you have the thing itself, and then you have this explosive that you attach to it, and then as soon as you hit the button, the whole thing explodes. So the whole thing exploded. Well, it didn't really. That bomb made the whole thing explode. A Tanai is somewhat the same thing. I have a gerushin, and I have a little attachment, a little bomb called a Tanai. And what that means is, even though anybody watching this says, well, he just did a gerushin, he gave her a get, and he said, Hare at Megureshes, right? Hare at Mutaris l'chaladim. He did everything he's supposed to do. Yeah, but he also said, Al Menas Shetitli Masayim Zuz. So that's a little ticking time bomb. If she is Mekayim the Tanai, then the gerushin is fine. If she's not Mekayim the Tanai, then that blows up the whole Maisa. Yeah, you did a Maisa gerushin, but it didn't create a gerushin because you made it Tanai.
So what you're saying is that if I say, here is your get, on the condition that you give me Masayim Zuz, and then she doesn't pay him, let's say until 2 weeks later. In those 2 weeks, is she available to other men?
That's the question that we're asking. That's the question we're asking. The Mishnah doesn't really comment on that. All the Mishnah says is the Tanai is binding, which means if she gives 200 zuz, she's megareshes.
It may be binding, but it is not. But it is not effective until it is carried out.
The Mishnah doesn't comment on when it is going to be valid. That we'll have to see in the Gemara. The Gemara will discuss it, and we'll have two opinions, and we'll have a better understanding of what exactly is it dependent on.
This performance clause doesn't necessarily have to be zuz, though. It could be
absolutely
give you a house.
Absolutely, yeah, jump up and down. As long as it doesn't fly like Superman, right? And it's actually a case. Amanashatali l'rakia. It's a case. Now, I don't know if she was a scientist for NASA. Maybe Amanashatali l'rakia is taka tonight. It's absolutely kind. But the Gemara uses that as an example of a maflik bidvar. You're just shooting the breeze. You're not really serious. That's something which is not really serious, and it's not. Therefore, it's not binding. You just, when I'll give you a get when pigs fly, right? If you say something like that, I'm an ask that it rains cats and dogs, right? So does he mean what colloquially we use that phrase to mean, or does he mean physically? That's what he's talking about. So if it's a Tanai which is reasonable, so then it's chav. It's not reasonable. It's not chav. Okay. Those are the first two cases of the Mishnah.
So besoch shloishim yayim, he's megureshes.
No, one second. We're going. If she gives the money within shloshim yayim, then she'll be megureshes. I didn't say when she's megureshes. I just said she's megureshes. But if she gives the money on day 31, she's not megureshes at all.
Why?
Because he gave a time limit. He says you have 30 days to come up with the money, then the gerushin is chal. If you do not come up with the money, the gerushin will not be chal.
But originally, he did not specify within a certain period of time.
There are two cases. One case, he does not specify the period of time. The second case, he does specify the period of time. Okay? So when he does not specify, then you're correct. She can do it at any time. But when he says, that's what he said. If that's what he says, she's got to give it within 30 days. Mm-hmm. Third case. Amr Shon Gamliel. Maisa betzidain be'achad shamal ishta rezikita chamanas.
Were you in the cases?
We're still in the Mishnah. Still in the Mishnah. Amr Shon Gamliel. Maisa betzidain be'achad shamal ishta rezikita chamanas shetitli yitztalisi. A Maisa about a Baal. It says, here's your get almanas that you give me back my fancy robe. People wore fancy robes back then. So I don't know, call it a cape. Yeah? His cape. Va'avda yitztalisai. She says, I can't find it anywhere, right? Maybe that's why they're getting divorced. She's always losing his clothing. Yeah, so she can't find his cape. And the Chacham said, you know what? Give him a replacement. Give him money. If you give him the value of the cape, then that's good enough. All right, so now this is kind of disjointed. We're spending time talking about a get al t'nai and then we jump in and we say, oh, by the way, if he says, give me a cape, you can go ahead and give him money for that. What does it want to do with the other? What's the flow in the Mishnah? I mean, it's t'nai, but that's a very, not a very good connection between these cases over here. Okay, so that's going to be a whole separate discussion on Amud Beis. We're going to focus on the first part of the Mishnah in the Gemara. My v'titein, says the Gemara, what does it mean she should give the money? Rav Huna Amar v'hi titein, Rav Yehuda Amar l'kesha titein. Rav Huna says, what that means is she must give the money. If she does not give the money, it will not be a good gerushin. Rav Yehuda says, l'kesha titein, when she gives the money. In other words, Rav Huna is saying the get is chal miyad. At the time of the Nesinas Haget, the get is chal. But if she doesn't give the Masayim Zuz, then it will uproot the get. The get will not be a good get. Rav Yehuda says, when you gave the get, it's only going to be a get once she gives Masayim Zuz. It'll only be chal later on. When she's Mekayim the Tanai, then the get will be chal. So according to Rav Huna, it's chal right away, or the more lumdish way to say it is it's chal lemafreya. So when you're Mekayim the Tanai, it works backwards from the time that you gave the get. According to Rav Yehuda, it's not chal from the time you gave the get, it's only chal from the time that you're Mekayim the Tanai. So up until the time that you're Mekayim the Tanai, she is considered an Ashes Ish. And the Gemara asks, my beinayu. It's kind of a funny question, because my beinayu, if she's an Ashes Ish or not, but whatever.
So according to Rav Huna, if she doesn't give the money, or she hasn't yet given the money, as long as she's alive, she's always suffering megureshes or sort of in limbo. I mean, she can give the money tomorrow, or unless till she dies, or till he dies.
So we're going to see later on in the Gemara that the Gemara says that even though when she's Mekayim the T'nai, according to Rav Huna, it'll work Lemafreya and be Megureshes from the beginning. If she chooses to get married, that's not a good idea. So she should not get married during that time. But Bidi Eved, if she was Makabel Kiddushin during that time, as long as she's Mekayim the T'nai, Lemafreya will be Chal. The problem is, the Rambam ignores that Gemara. And the Rambam, in his Psak, says she can get married l'chatchila. Before she's Mekayim the T'nai. Everybody jumps on the Rambam and says, what do you mean? How could she possibly get married before she's Mekayim the T'nai? It's a big problem in the Rambam. Maybe we'll get there, but we'll see the Gemara on the bottom that says not like that. So you're correct. We're kind of in limbo. So if she was Makabel Kiddushin, we don't say, what are you talking about? You're Ish. No, we say, well, let's wait and see. Let's see what's going to happen. Is she better be Mekayim the T'nai if she was Makabel Kiddushin from somebody else. But when she comes to base and says, hey, wait a second. You know, I'm just waiting for the money to come. The money's getting wired to me tomorrow. Yeah. So, but there's a eligible guy right now. He wants to be Mekadosh. Can I be Makabel Kiddushin today? He said, just wait till tomorrow. Yeah. Don't get married until you're Mekayim the T'nai. But if she didn't listen to us and she actually was Makabel Kiddushin, so let me say, listen, you're Makabel Kiddushin already. We're not going to be Afkia it, but let's be Mekayim the T'nai already. Okay. So that's the basic halacha over here, that she's in this status of limbo. But according to Rav Yehuda, there's nothing to talk about. According to Rav Yehuda, she can't be Makabel Kiddushin. If she did, she's an Ashes Ish. It's not typhus. Okay. So the Gemara asks this question, my benai, what's the difference between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda? Ika benai shen is kareya haget o she'avad. So the Gemara says is, what happens if the get became ripped up between the time of the Nesina and the time of the Kiyama T'nai? Says the Gemara, Rav Huna Amar v'hi titein ein etzricha mena get sheni. Rav Huna says, as long as you give the Masayim Zuz, it works on Mafreya. So you don't need a new get. The get was good from the beginning. So even if the get gets completely destroyed between the time of the Nesina and the time of the Kiyama T'nai, it's chal already from the beginning. So even though the get's not around when she gives the Masayim Zuz, it's a good gerushin. But Rav Yehuda Amar l'kesha titein tzricha mena get sheni. According to Rav Yehuda, if the get was destroyed, it's not going to work because the get can only be chal once she's mekayim the tanai. Okay. Right? According to Rav Yehuda, when is the gerushin chal? When she gives them a Masayim Zuz. So that means when she gives them a Masayim Zuz, now the get is being megarish. Oh, so the get is being megarish right now. If she doesn't have the get, because it got burnt, got destroyed, there's nothing to talk about. It can't be megarish. Your Nesina from before is not going to work for right now.
Just to carry it the rest of her life.
She has to carry it until she's mekayim the tanai. Once she's mekayim the tanai, then she can get rid of it. She doesn't need it anymore. Utnan nami gabi kiddushin ki agav. The Gemara says we have the same discussion when it comes to kiddushin, right? Just plug it in. It's the same case. Ditran, the Mishnah says in kiddushin, Homer leisha haret mukadeshes le'al menashe etin lach masayim zuz. So when it comes to kiddushin, the Baal is trying to convince the Isha to be makabel kiddushin. So here it's the other way around. He says, Hare at mikudeshes le'al menashe etin lach masayim zuz. By gerushin. So he says, you want to be freed from this marriage so you can marry somebody else? Pay me. In Kiddushin, it's the other way around. He's got to convince her to marry him. So there he says, I'm going to give you...
But it doesn't say when. It'd be a week or a month after the Kiddushin.
Correct. So the Mishnah says she's Mekudeshes as long as he gives the money. V'itmar, my v'yitain, and the Gemara goes to the same conversation. What does v'yitain mean? Rav Huna Omer v'hu yitain. Rav Huna says he's got to give it. If he doesn't give it, it's not a good kiddushin. But if he gives it, it's a good kiddushin. But when is the kiddushin chal from? From the time he gave the money. From the time he made, what does money mean? From the time he was mekadesh her. From the time he did the ma'aseh kiddushin. Rav Yehuda Omer l'kshiyitain, and Rav Yehuda says no, it's only a good kiddushin once she goes ahead and is mekayim the tanai. My benayu, what's the difference? What's the nafkamina between them? Ike benayu shepashti yada v'kilu kiddushin me'acher. Nafkamina is what happens if she's makabel kiddushin from somebody else. Well, if she's makabel kiddushin from somebody else, she has to be a non-eishus ish. According to Rav Huna, if she's mikudeshes lemafreya, so that means she was an eishus ish from the time of kiddushin, and therefore pashti yada v'kilu kiddushin me'acher will not be chal. Whereas according to Rav Yehuda, he says by Kiddushin will only be chal once he gives them the Masayim Zuz. So if the Baal didn't yet give you the Masayim Zuz and you were Makabel Kiddushin from somebody else, then you are Mikudeshes to the other person, and therefore the Kiddushin of the Baal who gave you Al Tanai is not going to be chal because she's already an Eshes to somebody else.
So if under the chub he says, Harayat Mikudeshes li, if when I give you
Masayim Zuz,
but he doesn't give it until...
And somebody jumps up after the chuppah and is Mekadesh and she's Makabel Kiddushin, she's not Mekudeshes to him, she's Mekudeshes to the other guy. Rav Yehuda. Correct. She's Mekudeshes to the second guy. So now, it's very interesting. The Gemara gives an afkamina of Pashli Yadav Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher. Basically, it's another fancy way of saying, is she an Eshes Ish or not? If she's an Eshes Ish, there's no Tfisas Kiddushin. If she's not an Eshes Ish, then there is Tfisas Kiddushin. Just a fancy way of saying, is she an Eshes Ish or not? Isn't that the nafkamina by Gerushin as well? In other words, by Gerushin, we also could have said the same thing. According to Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda says by Gerushin that the get will only be chal once she gives Masayim Zuz. Before that, the Gerushin will not be chal. So what happens if Pashta Yada v'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher between the time of the Gerushin and the time that the Gerushin was chal because of the Masayim Zuz, or between the Kiyum Tanai, we'll call. So according to Rav Yehuda, when is the Gerushin chal? Once she gives him a Masayim Zuz. So if she was Pashti Yad V'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher, will not be chal. She's still an Eshes Ish. But according to Rav Huna, that says it's chal mafreya by Gerushin, so then it'll turn out that her Pashti Yad V'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher was a good Pashti Yad V'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher, and Imni says, if she gets married, lo teitze, because it's chal mafreya, the Gerushin be chal mafreya. So we have an afkamina by Gerushin also Pashti Yad V'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher. So the Rishonim are bothered. Why does the Gemara, in the first case of Gerushin, have to jump to an afkamina of the get was ripped up or was burnt? It could have said, Pashti Yad V'Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher. And that would be the same nafkamina as by Kiddushin. Now you could ask the question the other way around as well. Once you said Niskareya Haget Ol Shenevad, why don't you say the same thing by Kiddushin?
In Kiddushin, she accepts the zuz or whatever it is for the kesef kedushin. She has to keep holding on to that zuz till
Very good.
um,
So Zok Taisus,
200.
Zok Taisus, that's why by Kiddushin it's different. That's why the Gemara did not want to say by Kiddushin, the nafkamina is if the money got destroyed between the time of the Kiddushin and the time that there was a kibbutz tonight. One second. Just finish this point, and then we'll get to it. Why over there is it different? The Gemara says that when it comes to money, money is different. Because even after the money is gone, it created a shibud. When I give an isha for kiddushin, $10 for kiddushin, this is the most of kiddushin. When I give her that money, if something happens to the $10, the kiddushin is still a kiddushin. So if I say, Harad mekudesh esli la'achar shloishim yoim, even if the money is not around la'achar shloishim yoim, when I gave you the $10, you were mischayev to me to give me back the $10 if the kiddushin is not going to be a good kiddushin. So there's something called a shibud. There's like a lien on you for that money. So when it comes to money, money exists even when the physical money does not exist. So the shibud is there. So the Gemara says, "Afal pishinis achlu hamos." Even if the money is consumed, she takes that $10, she goes to CVS and buys something. And now she doesn't have the money anymore. When the T'nai is going to be Niskayim, the Kiddushin is still a good Kiddushin because the Shibud of the Moses Kaim. So therefore, says Taisvis, we couldn't say the Nafkamina of Niskareya Haget by Kiddushin, Niskareya or Nevad HaKesef. Says Taisvis, well, if it was Kiddush Shtar, then you could say that Nafkamina, because by Kiddush Shtar would be the same thing as by a get. If the get is not around for the Gerushin, it's not a good Gerushin. If the Shtar Kiddushin is not around for the Kiddushin, it's not good. But says then it gets a little choppy, because by Kiddushin you'd have to say Pashtu Yad of a Kibla Kiddushin Me'acher Al Yedei Shtar or something like that. And then if it was a Shtar or Niskareya Shtar Kiddushin between the time of the Kiddushin, not Pashtu Yad, but Niskareya Shtar Kiddushin depends on what he was Mekadosh with. If he's Mekadosh with Kesef, it doesn't matter what happens to the Kesef. But if it was Mekadosh with Shtar, so it all depends what happened with the Shtar. So since in Kiddushin it's not always going to be true, therefore the Gemara didn't want to say that chiluk by Kiddushin. But we have the question the other way around. The Pashti Yod of a Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'achar by Kiddushin could have been the Nafkamina by Gerushin. Why did the Gemara want to say Pashti Yod of a Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'achar by Gerushin? Taisvis says the Gemara could have said it and it chose not to. Taisvis doesn't really explain why. One of the Rishonim says when we're in Gerushin we like to talk about Gerushin. When we're in Kiddushin we like to talk about Kiddushin. So in Gerushin it gives you an Nafkamina of Niskarei Haget.
Right.
And in Kiddushin, it gives an afternoon of Pashti Yad of a Kibbutz Kiddushin Me'acher. That's one of the Rishonim says. Okay, that's the general way to learn. There is another way to learn. I'll pee that in Rambam, which makes everything exact. Everything has to be exactly the way the Gemara says it, but we'll have to wait to see if that's
Which
true.
Kiddushin? When he says Harayat,
Yeah,
when I will give you so many zuz and so
200 zuz. So right now he gave her kesef. One
What?
second, let's be clear.
But where-
He says Hared Mekudesh Asli Bepruta Zu. Al Menas She'etan Loch Masayim Zuz.
Okay.
So in addition to the money of the
Right.
Kiddushin,
So
yeah.
take a declaration, but there's Lifnei Edim. With Kedushin, you need Edom. So
Gerushin also you need
So
Edom.
he becomes a Balchov.
Well, you're right. She also becomes a Baal Schleif.
So therefore, it should be Chal then, that he still owes the money.
No. If he's not Mekayim the Tanai, the Kiddushin will not be Chal.
Even though the witnesses say he does owe because he promised.
He didn't promise. What he said was, Hare at Mekudesh Asli al Menas, on condition that I give you 200 zuz.
That's
That
not a
allows
promise.
me. All right, so it's a good point what you're saying. The Rishonim point out that just because I did something al Tanai, it does not mechayev me, it doesn't obligate me to be mekayim the Tanai. That is a point that the Rishonim make over here, that just because I made a condition does not mean, why do we call it a condition? It's on condition. In other words, it's optional. It's not really obligatory. So really, even though in the language it sounds like, I'm promising I'm going to give you Messiah Zuz. That's not what it means. That's not what it means, says Rishonim. What it means is, I'm giving you a possible Kiddushin. If I give you Messiah Zuz, this Kiddushin will be a good Kiddushin. If I don't, it won't. An easier way
So it's not a true obligation then.
It's not a true obligation. No, it's similar to the case that we discussed before. If let's say he's giving a get,
Given what?
a get,
Ah,
and he's going on a trip, and she's concerned you're going to go on a long trip and you might never come back. So he says to her, here's the story. I'll give you a get, al tanai. What's the tanai? If I show up within 12 months, so I'm not leaving you for over a year, then the get is not a good get. But if 12 months pass and I have not yet returned, then the get will be a good get. See, that you understand. If he shows up, is it a get?
no.
No, because you understand that it's conditional.
Uh-huh.
It's the same thing when it comes to Almanas she'etan lach masayim zuz. It's not a choiv mammon, but rather it's the same, it's conditional. That's the idea. Okay?
Because with certain tanoim, you obligate yourself.
So there's a whole big discussion in the Achronim.
Yeah.
There's a big tzois about this. What happens if he makes a tanai and the tanai was not made properly? So the tzois learns that even though it's not binding in terms of the maisa, so if let's say there are certain rules to making a tanai. Let's say he says, we're jumping a little bit, but because you mentioned it, I want to explain it. If a person makes a tanai that is not a tanai which is chal from today, like we have this discussion between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, even Rav Huna is masking, that if I say, this gerushin that I'm giving you right now is not a gerushin from today. It's only a gerushin once you give me the Messiah Zuz. Of course, even according to Rav Huna, it's not chal right away, because he said explicitly, I don't want it to be chal until you actually give me the money of the Messiah Zuz. If he says that, then all the Rishonim agree that there's a very specific formula that he needs to say the Tanai. It needs to be Tanai kafel. Means doubled. Im titni li Messiah Zuz tehe migreshas, vim loy titni li Messiah Zuz, ein migreshas. That's Tanai kafel. Hein koidim lulav. Im titni li Messiah Zuz tehe migreshas, im loy titni li Messiah Zuz, ein migreshas. You can't say the negative first, you have to say the positive first. Tanai koidim lamaisa. You have to say im titni li Messiah Zuz tehe migreshas. You can't say harei zegitech im titli Messiah Zuz. The Tanai has to come first. Tanai koidim lamaisa. Im titni Messiah Zuz, harei migreshas. Im loy titni li Messiah Zuz, ein at migreshas. And it has to be something which is efshalakayim, something which is possible for her to do. So all these four rules have to be in every Tanai, as long as it is a regular Tanai, which means when I say regular Tanai, what I mean is it will be chal only once you're Mekayim the condition, not Lamafreya, only once you're Mekayim the condition. If we're going Lamafreya, that's a whole discussion. The Rishonim, Machlekes Rishonim, if you need to have the four. But the point is, let's say he did it wrong. Let's say he said to her, Harei zegitech im titni Messiah Zuz. So he didn't make a Tanai kafel. He didn't put Tanai kafel Lamaisa. He also didn't do Hein Kol Malav because he didn't do a double Tanai. So the Tanai is not binding. So now she's Migrashis. Says the Ketzos. She still has to give him 200 zuz. Why does she have to give him 200 zuz? Says the Ketzos. If she doesn't give the 200 zuz, it's still a good Gerushin. Because the Tanai was not binding, it wasn't bound with the Gerushin. But the Tanai is binding. Because when she's Makabel the get from him, after he says, if you give Messiah Zuz, then you'll be Migrashis. If she's Makabel the get, then it's like she's accepting upon herself a hischayvus of the 200 zuz, like a chayv, like you said. So the Ketzos actually learns that that's the halacha, even though it's not muskir anywhere in Shas. The Nitzivus asks on the Ketzos, how can you say such a huge chiddush that a Tanai that was not done properly is not binding for the Maisa, but it is binding for this chayvus, and you can't find it anywhere in Shas? So Nitzivus says it can't be such a thing. But the Ketzos says yes, that will be the halacha. So what you're saying is actually a very, very big machlekes in the Achronim HaPoskim. Would a person still be bound by those words? Because when you accept it, it's like his lashon, it's like a schirus. It's like the same way if I hire you to do a particular job and you accept that responsibility, it's like she accepted that responsibility. She says, if I accept this get, that means I'm going to give you $200. So it's not a Tanai, but it's this chayvus. That's a very, very interesting case. Okay. But let's get back to our Gemara. So the Gemara says that Bein L'inin Gerushin, Bein L'inin Kiddushin, we have a machlekes across the board between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. What's the machlekes? The machlekes is when a person says Haret Megureshes or Haret Mekudeshesli, Al Menas, Shetitni Masayim Zuz, She'eten Lach Masayim Zuz, whichever one it is. Rav Huna says it's Chal Mafreya. Rav Yehuda says it's only Chal once you are Mekayim the Tanai. What is the machlekes dependent on? How, would they just have two arbitrary opinions? Where does it come from? What's the argument over here? So that's the Gemara. First, the Gemara makes a tzrichasa. Tzrichasa means, why do Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda need to argue about their opinions in two different places? Kiddushin and Gerushin, should there be any difference between Kiddushin and Gerushin? If it works on Mafreya by Gerushin, it works on Mafreya by Kiddushin. If it works from the Shas Kiyam Tanai by Gerushin, it works from the Shas Kiyam Tanai by Kiddushin. It shouldn't be any different. What should be a difference? So why do they have to repeat their machlekes? Utzricha. Di'i Ashmin Agabi Kiddushin, if you told me by Kiddushin that there's a machlekes, Bahaka Am Rav Huna. So that, again, Rav Huna is the one who holds the Mafreya. Maybe only by Kiddushin it's Chala Mafreya, V'hu Yitain. Mishum de L'Kreva Kasi, because he's trying to acquire his wife. So does he want to acquire her sooner or later? If he's already decided this is the right woman, then he wants her to be Mekudesh just today. He doesn't want to wait. So therefore, over there, it's Chala Mafreya. When it comes to Gerushin, that's something where he is severing the ties of marriage. That's something which he needs to do with a proper head. He needs to give himself time. He doesn't want to make a rash decision. So there he's going to push it off. He's going to say, you know what? Let's give ourselves a little bit of time. When you're Mekayim the Tanai, then the get will be Chal. But right now, it's not going to be Chal. Maybe Rav Huna would be invited to Rav Yehuda. So then just tell me Gerushin. If I know Gerushin, then automatically Kiddushin, right? Says the Gemara, no. Maybe Rav Huna only says by Gerushin, that it'll be Chal right away. The Gemara says, interesting svar. Why? Mishum deloy kasif lemitva. Because what are we concerned about? We're concerned maybe the Tanai will not be Niskayim. Why will the Tanai not be Niskayim? What was the Tanai by Gerushin? You, the Isha, you need to give me 200 zuz. He is not going to be shy telling the Isha, you need to give me 200 zuz. So he doesn't need to be Taila the Gerushin. When you give me the money, then the Gerushin will be Chal. He could say the Gerushin should be Chal from today as long as you give me the money in the end. And every week he gives her a phone call and says, you know, I haven't gotten the 200 zuz yet. He has no problem going ahead and nagging her for the money. It's no problem. Avagabi Kiddushin. When it comes to Kiddushin, what's the case by Kiddushin? He says, Arei at mekudeshesli, almanas she'eten lach masayim zuz. So put yourself in the woman's situation. So he goes ahead as Mekadesh her, almanas that I will give you to the woman 200 zuz. So now he's Mekadesh her from today, and now he owes her 200 zuz. So what? A week later, during Shabbat Brachas, he says, you know, you said you were going to give me 200 zuz. It's probably not a good idea for her to do that in the first week of Shabbat Brachas. And then a week later, you know, she's going to bring it up now. Well, we're just newly married. I'm not going to say, oh, you owe me $200. Like, it's really not the right conversation to have. So you know what? She's going to think, you know what? I've got a solution. The Kiddushin will not be a Kiddushin until you give me 200 zuz. Because I'm concerned I'm not going to have the courage to demand that you're Mekayim tonight. And if I don't demand it, you know what's going to happen? We don't have a Kiddushin. And that's not good for anybody. So we don't want to have her in a situation where she's going to be embarrassed to ask him to be Mekayim tonight, and he won't end up being Mekayim tonight. They'll think they're married, and they're really not married. So therefore, maybe over there, we'd set it up differently. We'd say the whole Kiddushin hinges actively on the Nesina Sakesef. If you give him Messiahim says, from that day, then there's a Kiddushin. Until then, there's no Kiddushin. But by Kiddushin, the Ksifula Mitzvah, that's what it means. She is shy to ask for the money. Ema Modele Rav Yehuda. By the way, Ksifula Mitzvah, what's La Mitzvah?
To ask for the money.
So Mitzvah is from Lashon Tviyah. So the Ritva points out, what? She can demand the money? I thought a Tanai is optional. So Ritva says, don't learn the Gemara like you learned that Tviyah means you could demand the money because you obligated yourself in the money, but rather Tviyah means, like you said, you can ask for the money. But it's interesting because Tviyah sometimes means actual claim. So Ritva says, don't learn like that because he's being aimed on that point that you brought up. So now, That's all in Rav Huna. Now we got to go to Rav Yehuda. Why does Rav Yehuda need to make a statement? Bein begerushin, bein bekiddushin. When it comes to kiddushin, Rav Yehuda says we're going to push it off. Why? Same svar, mishum b'ksif l'mitveh, because she's embarrassed to ask him for the money. So she'll say, okay, the kiddushin won't be a kiddushin until you give me the money. That way we'll be guaranteed to make sure that the kiddushin will be a kiddushin. Over there, he's not concerned about asking her for the money afterwards. So maybe Rav Yehuda would agree to Rav Huna that the gerushin is chal mafreya. And if Rav Yehuda told us that gerushin is chal later, why? Because he wants to distance the time, give extra time in order to decide to be merachik her. When it comes to kiddushin, where they want to start the relationship already, so maybe he'd be mother to Rav Huna, that'll be chal mafreya. And therefore, both according to Rav Huna and according to Rav Yehuda, they needed to tell you their opinions by gerushin and by kiddushin, because there are chiddushim in each one that you would not have known from the other. Okay, tzricha. Gemara says, basically, if a person says, this is a brisa, af al pi shenikra haget o shenevad megreshas ulaacher lo tinase at shetite. So this is what I told you before, that we're going to have a brisa. What does this brisa say? The brisa says, if he says and assuming she gives the Messiah zuz eventually, even though the get becomes destroyed between the time of the Nesinas Haget and the time of the Kiyum Hatanai, she is Megureshes. This is a riot to Rav Huna. The get became destroyed between the time of Nesina and the time of the Kiyum Hatanai. According to Rav Yehuda, if the get is destroyed at the time of Kiyum Hatanai, it can't be Megarish according to Rav Yehuda. So this price is a raya to Rav Huna, that even though the get is destroyed, it's Chalam Afreya, and therefore there's no problem. Additionally, the Brisa says, in other words, even though it's Chalam Afreya, don't think you can get married l'chatchila. But l'chatchila, you should not get married until you actually give the money. But it's certainly mashma, the b'diavad, if she was Makabel Kiddushin, as long as she actually gives the money in the end, then she is not Teitze. She doesn't have to leave. So that's problem number one with Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda is now against the ropes. So Rav Huna has a brisa on his side. These are Amoraim. And we have a brisa. It's like a Tana. So you have a Tana, not like Rav Yehuda. Tanya, another brisa. What happens if he says, that you give him a Zuz, and then he dies? If she gave him the money before he died, then that was a Kiyum Tanai, and therefore she's Megareshes, and therefore there is no din of Chalitza or Yibum. But if she did not give the 200 Zuz before, and now he died, so the Gerushin was not a Gerushin, and there's no way to make the Gerushin a Gerushin. She can't go to the Kever and give 200 Zuz on the Kever. He can't be Makabel it anymore. So then it is not a good Gerushin, and that means she is Oyla Chalitza Yibum. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer, Noisenes la'aviv v'la'achev v'la'achev v'na'krayvim. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, game's not over. She can still be Mekayim tonight. Because he didn't mean specifically to give it to him. You're right, if he's still alive, I'm an ash to the Messiah says. But if it's not me, so give it to one of my Yorshim, give it to his father, give it to his brother, give it to one of his kids. So we have a machlekes, Tana Kam and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, can you be Mekayim this tonight after Misa? If you're being Mekayim tonight after Misa, it's not going to work like Rav Yehuda, because you're Mekayim tonight after he died, which is Megareshes after he died. After he died, there's no issues to talk about. So obviously, the whole conversation can be only in the opinion of Rav Huna. The whole point is, can you be Mekayim the tonight still? And if you can, everybody agrees it's going to be Chalam Afreya from the time that they were alive. Ad kan lapligi el demar savali v'lo liyorshi umar savali afili yorshi. The only machlekes between Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is what? Can you be Mekayim the time? When he says, Amenashe titni li, does li mean li as opposed to anybody else, including my family? Mm-hmm. Or does li include his family? Machlekes. V'kuli alamiyah tanav, but everybody agrees that's a t'nai, meaning that once you give it, it's chalam afreya. tiyuvta de Rav Yehuda. So we have a double tiyuvta against Rav Yehuda. We have the two brises that are mashma like Rav Huna and not like Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda is twice against the ropes. Melech Rav Yehuda answers the following: Mani Rabbi, de Omer Rav Huna Omer Rabbi, kol ha'omer al manas ka'omer me'achshav dami upligi rabbanan alei v'ano de ami k'rabbanan. Says Rav Yehuda, he says it's very nice. You have a brisa like you, yeah, because you know what? That's the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi says kol ha'omer al manas ka'omer me'achshav dami. If you make a t'nai with the lashon of almanas, there are two lashonos that you generally use for making a t'nai. Im titni li masayim zuz harei zagitech. Almanas shetitni li masayim zuz harei zagitech. It's two different lashonos. Says Rabbi, if you said almanas shetitni li masayim zuz timagarashes, then it's kemei achshav. It's like you said the gerish lo bechame achshav from before. But if you said im titni li masayim zuz timagarashes, then it's only chal once you're mekayim the t'nai. So Rav Yehuda says these brises go like Rabbi, because what's the case? You said almanas. Oh, that's Rabbi's shita. He holds that almanas is code word for me'achshav. But the Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say whether you said im titni masayim zuz or almanas shetitni masayim zuz, it all means the same thing. When you're mekayim it tonight, then it's going to be a good get. So you and I, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, we're arguing in an old machlekes. This is a machlekes between Rabbi and the Chachamim. If kol ha'omer al manas is ka'omer me'achshav dami. You, Rabbi, Rav Huna is going like Rabbi, and I, Rav Yehuda, am going like the Rabbanan. Good? So you're going to find brises that go like Rabbi, because he's a Tana, but you're also going to find brises that go like me, because I'm going like the Rabbanan. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The Amr Rabbi Zera. Comes Rabbi Zera, and he says, Ki havinan bebavel amrinan. When I learned in Bavel, so Zera learned for part of his life in Bavel, and then when he's older, he came to Eretz Yisrael. And a lot of the Amoraim, when they came to Eretz Yisrael, they were amazed at the Chachma of the Chachma Eretz Yisrael, and there were things that they learned very differently over there. So they always talk about, when I was in Bavel, the way I understand this thing, and then when I came to Eretz Yisrael, I heard differently. So that's what Zera is saying. Ki havina bebavel amrinan hada amar Rav Huna amar Rabbi kol ha'omer manaskar me'achshav dami pligi rabbanan alei. When I was in Bavel, we used to say there's a machlekes between Rabbi and Rabbanan if kol ha'omer al manas is ka'omer me'achshav. Rabbi says yes, and the Rabbanan say no. Ki sliki, but when I came, salik means to go up. Your oile aliyah. When he went up to Eretz Yisrael, ki salik ashkachte l'Ravasi. I found Ravasi. Rabbi Yochanan was in Eretz Yisrael. He said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hakol moidin be'oimer al menas ka'omer me'achshav dami. He said there is no such machlekes. Rabbi and the Rabbanan both agree that al menas is ka'omer me'achshav. So he made it up. There is no sheet of the Rabbanan that says al menas is not ka'omer me'achshav. There is a machlekes Rabbi in the Chachamim. What machlekes is that? This is the brisa that tells us the machlekes Rabbi in the Chachamim. Mehayom alachar misa get ve'enu get the Chachamim. Rabbi Amr kazeh get. Tanakam says mehayom alachar misa is a suffix get, and Rabbi says kazeh get. Rabbi said it's a good get. What's Mehayim Alachar Misa? So this is a bit of a blast from the past. Yeah, we saw the Mishnah before that says Mehayim. Let's start from the beginning. Hareze gitech imati. If he says this is a get if I die, not a good get, because that means it's only a get after Misa. Get after Misa doesn't work. But if he says Hareze gitech Mehayim imati, that's good, because then he's saying it's going to be Chalam Afred Mehayim. What happens if he says Hareze gitech la'achar misa? Certainly that's no good. What happens if it says Hareze gitech mehayom ula'achar misa?
It's from day one then.
But he says mehayom ula'achar misa.
So then
So what's achar misa? Oh, so we learn
get from day one then.
That's if mehayom imati. From today, if I die. But what about mehayom ula'achar misa? from today and after I die. What do you mean from today and after you die? Which one is it?
Superfluous. That's-
Obviously. So the Gemara has a suffix. The Gemara says it's a suffix. Is he saying mehayom like mehayom imati, or is he saying mehayom and he says, you know what, lachar misa?
Maybe it's a grudge. He wants to say in the afterlife, I will disavow any.
So if he's saying it out of the context of gerushin, then yeah, it's possibly saying that. But in the context of gerushin, he's saying harei zagitech lachar misa. So the assumption is that when he's saying lachar misa, maybe he's actually changing his mind. Maybe he's being chayzer and he's saying it's chal lachar misa, and therefore it's not a good get. So if he says mehayom and the stress is on the mehayom, and la'achar misa just means if he dies, then everything's good. It's a good get. But if what he meant was
Good
la'achar
get.
misa,
It's a good
yeah,
get.
from the beginning, from
A
life,
good get from the beginning.
from the beginning. But if what he meant was no la'achar misa, first he says mehayom and then he says he changed his mind. No, it's really la'achar misa. So then it's get la'achar misa. Get la'achar misa doesn't work. So we have a suffix. What does he mean? So the Mishnah said before, if he says mehayom ula'achar misa, get ve'ino get. That's what we knew until now. We now have a Gemara that tells us not like that. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan.
That's a good get.
It's a suffix.
What?
Mehayom ula'achar misa is a suffix because he didn't say mehayom im mati. He said mehayom ula'achar misa. It's like saying from today and 30 days from now. Well, what do you mean from today and 30 days from now? From today until 30 days from now, I understand. But what do you mean from today and 30 days from now? Which one is it? Is it from today or is it from 30 days from now? So if he says from today and after I die, well, which one is it? Is it from today or
What
after he
happens if
dies?
on day 10.
That doesn't make a difference. He's dead. The point is, if the get is chal after he died, right? He didn't say 30 days. He didn't say 30 days. He said if he dies from today, ula achar misa. So when he says la'achar misa, it sounds like he's talking about after death. So what does he mean? Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he's now saying it should be a get after death, and that's not going to be a good get. We don't know what he means. Therefore, we have a suffix gerushin. That's what we learned in the Mishnah before. Rabbi says, mehayom ulachar misa is a good get. You know why Rabbi says that? Because Rabbi says, what is this guy, crazy? He's dying. He's going to say mehayom ulachar misa? When he said mehayom ulachar misa, what he meant was mehayom imati. What he meant is from today, because he's concerned he's going to die. That's what he meant. So Rabbi says we have a more loose translation of the words because he's in a difficult situation. So he's not going to be so careful with his words. But Rabbanan say no, we can't go beyond what he said. If that's what he said, that's what he said. We're stuck with it. So it's a suffix gerushin. So now the Gemara says you thought that they argue also in the case of Almanas. If Almanas is going ma'achshav, you're wrong. That's what you thought in Bavel. But now you're in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, we know there's no Machlekes Rabbi nor Rabbanan. When it comes to Almanas, everybody agrees Almanas is coming ma'achshav, and Rabbi Yehuda, you're up the creek. You don't have an opinion to be Samichan. So that's the Gemara says over here. The Gemara says, Ul Rabbi Yehuda da'amr ba'almanas pligi. Ad miflig be'amal achamisa, liflig ba'almanas l'diach ha'koicha de Rabbi. Ad v'liflig ba'almanas l'diach ha'koicha de Rabbanan. Says the Gemara koicha de ha'teira others. So the Gemara gets involved in, okay, so what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? So in other words, we have machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan says there is no machlekes Rabbi in the Chachamim about Almanas. Everybody agrees Almanas is going ma'achshav. Rabbi Yehuda says I'm forced to say that there is a machlekes between Rabbi and the Chachamim about Almanas if it's ka'emim me'achshav, and I hold like the Rabban. So we're left with a machlekes Amoraim. Was there a machlekes Tanaim between Rabbi and Rabbanan if Almanas is ka'emir me'achshav? Okay, we paskin Almanas is ka'emir me'achshav, and that's how we learn in halacha, and therefore we go like Rav Huna in this case, and therefore by gerushin and by kiddushin it would be chal l'mafrei, it would be chal from the moment of the gerushin, the moment of the kiddushin, as long as the tanai is in the sky. Okay.
No, you'll be away next week and the week
Yes,
after?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Let people know.